All right, welcome to Inclusive Design, Thinking Beyond Accessibility and Braving the Snow, and making it to this session. It's been really fun in Iceland so far. If everyone was on the tour yesterday, I thought it was great. I had a fun time. So a little bit about myself first. My name is Michael Miles. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts in the United States. So I should be used to weather like this, but it's been really warm. So we haven't had a lot of snow. I've been working with Drupal since 2008, doing everything under the sun, from theming, content entry, module development. I organize the Boston Drupal meetup, which meets the first Tuesday of every month. If you're ever in town, we have free beer and whatnot at the meetup, so please come. My day job is the associate director of PHP for a digital marketing agency called Genuine. Genuine is not a Drupal shop. We do a whole lot more than Drupal. We use a whole lot more than just Drupal. So we have .NET team who uses Sitecore and whatnot. On my team, we mainly do Drupal, and most of the day I'm architecting large-scale platforms on top of Drupal. At night, I run a podcast called Developing Up. If you've listened to it, thank you for listening. If you haven't, it's about the non-technical side of being a developer. So how to work on a team, how to ask for help, which is the latest episode, how to set career goals, stuff like that. So I have swag outside, stickers. Feel free to grab one. And if you want to know more about me, anywhere on the internet, I'm Mike Miles86 from Drupal.org, Slack, LinkedIn, Google+. If anyone uses Google+, I think I'm still on that. Twitter, so reach out there. So I want to start out today by saying we all have one thing in common, besides loving Iceland so far, loving this camp, and loving Drupal. I believe that everyone here wants to make a positive impact on as many people as possible every day. Who would agree with this statement? Yeah, the whole room. That's great. So whether you're a developer, project manager, designer, UX developer, you go to work to build something useful to improve the lives of somebody else. That's what we do in development. Inclusive design relates to that because it is planning considerations to ensure that a product, service, or environment is as usable by everyone to the greatest extent possible. Roughly describes exactly what we do every day. Now, the reason why I say it's thinking beyond accessibility is because when we are building projects, we try to pay attention to these items: vision impairment, hearing impairment, cognitive ability, and mobility issues or dexterity, being able to work a mouse. We like to plan these into our digital projects so that we make our websites or applications more usable to people to everybody. But the truth is, there's way more differences that separate us as people. Our location, our gender, the languages we speak, our education levels, our age. They all change how we experience the web, experience and interact with digital products. So in thinking about these different additional differences that separate us as people, that's what inclusive design is about. It's about thinking about these other things. And in my research of inclusive design, I've developed what I call 4 pillars of inclusive design. Here, I can put that back up if you want a photo. You got it? All right. Thanks. So I came up with my 4 pillars of inclusive design, and these are 4 things I want to talk to you about today. They are 4 basic ideas that if we encompass into how we work, we can make the web better for everybody and plan our projects from the onset to be more inclusive. So it's no user is average. Every user deserves equal access, to provide understandable content for every user, and every user deserves our trust and respect. I'm going to copyright these, but it's Creative Commons 4.0 open, so you feel free to take them and use them as you'd like. So I didn't just come up with these on my own. I based them off of 10 principles of inclusive design by Sandy Wasmer. She's a UX developer somewhere in the UK. I forget where. But she developed 10 principles that the UK government included into their e-accessibility plan starting in 2011. And they're really great things that they use as guidelines for every project they work on. So I kind of condensed it down and ran with her ideas to come up with my own. So, pillar number 1, no user is average. If we believe that no user is average, what's going to happen is we have to understand that every person that interacts with our application has a difference in experiences the web in a different way. there's no such thing as an average user. And actually, there's a TED Talk called The Myth of Average by Ted Rose. He is a high school dropout, but a Harvard professor, which is really cool. And he talks about how there is no such thing as the average user. And he says, if you design for the average, you're literally designing for nobody. Now, at first, this may not make sense, because you think about, if I'm going to build something, I'm going to figure out the average for everything and build for that one person to reach as many people as possible. But the truth is, there's no average user, as I mentioned a moment ago. There's no one who meets all those averages in whatever metrics you're using. Everyone falls either, I don't want to say below it, but to the left or to the right of the average. Right? And we have this wide range of users. So there's actually this story that Todd Rose talks about where in 1952, the American Air Force was having a problem. They had a new fighter jet that was not performing at all, sometimes fatally so. So they decided, okay, maybe it's the pilots. They swapped out all their pilots for new pilots, still poor performance. They said, all right, not the pilots, maybe it's the trainers. They swapped out the trainers, still poor performance. They swapped out the training material, still poor performance. It took them a while, but what they realized was the problem was between the cockpit and the pilots, the interface between the pilot and the fighter jet. And it's because they had given their contractors average measurements for all their pilots. And the U.S. Army has all these metrics on sizes. And so they're like, here's our average fighter pilot, build for them. The problem was they had no pilot that was average. So eventually they realized this, and they gave contractors a different set of guidelines. They said, build for our shortest, smallest pilot, and build for our tallest, biggest pilot. And in doing so, they had to plan for all the differences in between. So how many people here have ever adjusted a seat in a car? Yeah, everybody, right? So what those contractors did for their jets is they developed the adjustable seat, which got carried over into the automotive industry. So they built these differences that then everyone else benefited from. So Todd talks about that and how planning beyond the average user, or the average pilot in that case, it helps you build to work with more people. So how can we do this in our projects? There's a number of ways. The first way I see is by creating personas with limitations. How many people here are familiar with the term persona? All right, just about everybody. So it's a way to put a name and a face and a set of guidelines to the project you're building that everybody works towards, from design, development, UX, etc. So we should be pretty simple for us to add limitations or differences to these personas that affect what we build towards. And what am I talking about? Things like suffers from red-green color blindness. That may affect how we implement a design, choose our color scheme, choose contrast. It's a simple one-line change, a physical impairment that someone can't change about themselves. Or there's partial or temporary differences, like has a broken wrist due to a skiing accident. It could be a CEO persona who you want to reach your donation page. They can't work a mouse. Or does most of their work while traveling, outside differences that the person can't control. Someone who's in a cramped space with a lot of distractions, a lot of noise, small screen. All these things affect how someone interacts with our applications. So if we put small differences like this into our personas, we have to build differently. We have to think about these things. And if we make our applications work for people who have differences like this, then suddenly it works for everyone who doesn't. And I'm not saying these are the exact differences to use, but these are just examples. We can do something like map users based on the behaviors and not on who we think they are. So I know there's the UX principle of a user journey, which kind of explains a user's day and how they interact. What we can do instead is create experiences based on their expected behaviors, because no matter our differences as humans, our behaviors are pretty much the same. Sorry about that. So we can create what's called an impact map. And the way that works, it's pretty simple. It's kind of like Simon Sinek's, is that his name? Golden Circle, sort of like that, where we start with the why, we move on to the who, the how, and the what. So the why is, why do we want someone to perform an action in our application? Who is going to perform that? How we expect them to do that? And what the outcome is. Example may be, We want people to share our applications with their network of friends. Who's going to do that? Someone on a mobile device. How are they going to do that? We're going to put a big red Twitter button on the homepage. What's the outcome? They're going to be able to easily click that button and share our information. So you plan based on behaviors and not on what you think a person might do. That's not a good way to put it. No, I'll just say unexpected behaviors and think about how humans would interact. So if we believe that no user is average, and we plan for the differences, and we throw out the idea of the average user, what's going to happen is suddenly we're going to build our applications with the many differences that separate our users and change how they experience our applications. Suddenly we're going to build applications that touch these extremes and therefore work for everyone who falls within those extremes and don't have those limitations. All right, pillar number 2, every user deserves equal access. If we believe that every user deserves equal access, what's going to happen is we have to realize that the way people interact with the web or with digital products is very different. It's not just desktop machine with a fiber connection, Silicon Valley, awesome internet speeds. There's a whole variety of way that people interact with the web. Interesting statistic is 43% of Iceland's internet browsing is from a desktop computer as of 2015. What's interesting is that means 56% or 57% comes from a mobile device, tablets, other devices. Things that we can't really plan for the screen size, resolution. Even if there is a screen, it could be a screen reader. So since we can't determine, this is in Iceland, the US is similar. Those are the 2 countries I know the statistics about. So we can't depend on how something might render on someone's screen, but what we can control is how it renders, or what makes up what renders. So if we structure our content or our applications in a way that makes sense, we improve the experience no matter what device someone is using. And how can we do this? Well, there's this idea called semantic markup. It's all about using HTML tags, basically, the way they're meant to be used. And how do we determine how something's meant to be used? Well, there's a small company called the BBC, and they have huge documents on how to use HTML elements. Everything from H1s to ULs to emphasis tags. They outline almost every single HTML tag, when it should be used, how it should be used, and why it should be used that way. Great thing is they've open sourced their guidelines, so you can visit it. This is a bit.ly link, IDX-SEM-BBC, and I'll have these links later. So the value of this is that if we are using tags the same way every time in every application we build, then it makes it easier to recognize that these are going to be outlined and used the way that they're supposed to be used, and no matter what device someone's accessing our application from, say again like a screen reader, it's going to read the same way as someone on a desktop or a mobile or a tablet. We can use progressive design to deliver our experiences. Now, the idea of progressive design goes back to actually what design is about. It's about emphasizing what's important to the user. So if we start with the bare minimum of what we need to design, just highlight the important information, and then as we run metrics and determine how people are coming to our applications or our websites, and then adding additional elements and design elements to the page, then we are only impacting that person as we need to. So again, it's about highlighting what's important and then adding on to that. It's not about adding flashes and GIFs where we want to just to be flashy. We want to just highlight what's important to the user based on their connections and their devices. And finally, prioritize what we need to load onto the page. Do we need that third-party JavaScript library? Maybe someone on a mobile device doesn't have enough connection to load that. Do we need it to load first? Do we need those high-res images, or can we use responsive images? There's some great Drupal modules out there to help you do that, to deliver the right size images for the right device.
Can I add a note to that?
Yes.
How many pieces of content makes a big difference as well.
Yeah. How much content to load onto the page? Do we that's a good idea to follow like the 80-20 rule. What is the 20% of most important thing on this page that we need to deliver, and focus on that, getting that on the page first. So I'll say if we follow some of these guidelines, semantic markup, progressive design, prioritize what needs to be loaded, not only are we improving the experience for our actual users, but our, for lack of better terms, our deafest, dumbest, blindest user is Google. Google doesn't care about our design. Google doesn't care about what our page looks like. It cares about how it loads and how it can read our information so that it can categorize it, organize it, and deliver it to its users. And we want that to happen correctly. So if we use semantic markup, using the elements the way they're supposed to be used, then Google's going to know how to read our page and how to categorize our content. And that helps us, that helps our clients, that helps our users. So if we're helping Google, we're helping ourselves, and we're helping our users. All right, another statistic. The average global internet speed as of 2015 is 5.6 megabytes per second. To put that in perspective, the average web page size is 2.2 megabytes. So that is like half a second to load a page on average. Now, the slowest internet speed is the Republic of Mali in Africa, 0.5 megabytes per second. That means if you're in Mali, it will take you 6 seconds to load the Amazon homepage. I don't know how long delivery will take, but that's how long the web page will take. The fastest internet connection is South Korea at 26.7 megabytes per second on average per user. Iceland is not even in the top 10. It has an average of, I think it was 14.7 megabytes per second. The US is worse than that. So the important thing here is if we are building our applications and not thinking about how someone's going to access it or the speed they have, we could build applications that work great for people in South Korea. Pages load really quickly. They see all the assets. What's that going to do with everyone below that speed? In the Republic of Mali, is that it's going to take forever, and they're just going to not find our applications useful. But instead, if we were to flip our thinking and build in terms of the speed that Republic of Mali has, suddenly, if they have a good experience, everyone who has a better connection than them has a good experience. Now, I'm not saying we need to use these two extremes for every application we build, but keep in mind the differences people may have to connecting to the internet and how long it takes your page to load, how big your page size is. That has a big impact on how people experience the web. Now, we can work through this by artificially limiting ourselves. There are tools as developers that we can use. So the way I figured out how long Amazon would take to load for the Republic of Mali is in Chrome and in Firefox, you can say, hey, throttle my connection artificially to this speed. So we could use tools like that to change our connections and test our applications for these lower experiences, see how they work, see how they load. We could disable JavaScript. There are multiple reasons why people either don't have JavaScript running or they can have JavaScript running. So from security concerns to, again, I'll go back to using screen readers that may not execute JavaScript. So this means we can check to see if we don't have JavaScript on the page, can someone use our mega menu? Or can they view our carousel? I hate carousels, but everyone uses them. Is our website usable without JavaScript? If it's not, then there's many people we're going to be leaving out who can't access it. And can we navigate without a mouse? Going back to that persona, the CEO with a broken wrist. We want them to be able to get to our donation page. Can they get there without using their mouse? Is there someone who can't use a mouse for whatever reason, they have to navigate via keyboard? Can they get where they need to? Can they find the information that's important to them? If we can work and make sure these experiences have a positive impact, if we can make sure people with these have a positive experience, rather, then everyone who doesn't have these limitations will also have a positive experience. So if we believe that every user deserves equal access, what's going to happen is we have to throw out the idea that everyone has a great internet connection and is working from a single device. We have to plan on the differences of connections, where someone is, how they're loading, and how they load up our applications or websites via having JavaScript turned off or whatnot. Third pillar, to provide understandable content for every user. If we provide understandable content to every user, there's a big thing that we have to change in our thinking. To us, our applications are works of art, right? From our code to our design, we are very proud of them. We want to show them off. We're happy with how they look. To our users, our applications are just about one thing, getting information. That's all they care about. That's all they use your application or your website for, is to get some sort of information. They care about the content. So if we understand that, then we need to understand that we have to provide content that every user, or just about every user who comes to our website, can understand. Now, I have an example. The city of Boston recently relaunched their website, boston.gov. Genuine, the company I work for, had a hand in this, in the development. The previous website, this is the new website part of it. On the previous website, it was developed, it was prioritized by the city employees. So it was organized by city departments. So if you wanted to find out about street cleaning, you had to know what department in the city managed street cleaning, where on the website their department was, what subpage told you the street cleaning schedule. It wasn't easy to find. So in reworking their website, they started to think about, all right, what content is important to our actual users, the residents of the city of Boston. And they started to put these highlighted items on the homepage that most people care about, so that they get there quickly, and they have simple phrasing that allows someone who may not be a native English speaker can easily understand what that's about. And I have a great quote from the city's chief of information technology in an interview with the Boston Globe, where they say, "The website should act like a helpful human. This is one of the big differences between the old site and the new site. The old site, it would seem like you're interacting with some sort of lawyer robot that was speaking to you in government speak." And I think that speaks a lot about how their content was written and how it's written now. How delivering content that feels like it's coming from people to people, it makes a big difference on how people experience your application. So when we write our content, we want to be clear and direct with what we say. We want to do things like figure out simple phrasing we can use and avoid jargon where needed, or where we can. We want to pay attention to our font, our spacing, and our line length, how we actually output our content. And there's this great study, this excellent study that talks about how people read content on the web, and they do it in a way that's called an F pattern. So people will read the very first line of text, the first half of the next line, the quarter of the next line, the quarter of the next line, like they start to scan. So if we have a whole lot of content on the page that's grouped really close together, it's going to be hard for people to read it and comprehend it. If we use serif fonts, people who have dyslexic limitations, they're going to see the letters as struck out or running together. So if we use sans serif fonts with proper font spacing, it's easier to read those words and understand what they're saying. And then we can be meaningful with our content and use tools to check the readability scores. So readability, you may have heard people say, oh, this reads at a third grade reading level. This reads at a college reading level or university reading level. This reads at a sixth grade reading level. And what that talks about, it's not about the education level that someone has to have to understand the content. It's the mental strain that it actually takes to understand what is being written. And because it takes mental effort to understand and read something. So if we check our readability scores, and studies have shown that what's known as a sixth grade reading level provides complex enough content so anyone who's experienced in that field reading the content finds it engaging, and it's simple enough so anyone who's new or doesn't speak that language or is new to the language, they can still understand. And the way we can do this, I like using the tool HemingwayApp.com. It's not the only one out there. But you paste your content in, it highlights hard to read sentences, it tells you the reading score, it tells you, hey, here's some tips you can do to improve what you've written. Word has plugin for this. I don't know if Google Docs does or not. But there are simple tools that we can use just to check our content and help us gauge how hard it might be for our users to understand it. We can inform and guide our users with their content. We can remember that error messages are content, and we want to provide useful error messaging when something goes wrong. We don't want to scare our users. We want them to be like, hey, you missed this field, fill it out, please. Or, oh, something went wrong. Were you meaning to go to this page? Or something that's useful so that they don't get afraid and just leave the site. Again, going back to impact mapping, we can plan a user's journey and then think about what content we need to write in a way that helps guide them where they want to go so that they understand it. And then finally, provide contextual relations for content. And this goes back to the comment about how much content you add on the page. But to a human, how does content relate? Not just programmatically via tags or whatnot. What content is important to be shown together? To go back to the city of Boston, on the homepage, these 5 things they have here, they don't all necessarily go together via departments. But if you're a city resident, you may care about street cleaning and parking meters, then you probably care about tow lots. And I can tell you as a city resident, if you don't know the rules about street cleaning, you want to know where the tow lots are. So they decided, let's put these things on the homepage to make them easier to find, because to humans, they're contextually related. So if we believe in providing understandable content for every user, we have to write our content in a way that is human readable, that's simple to understand, but still gets our important message across. All right, finally, the 4th pillar, provide every user with trust and respect. If we believe in providing every user with our trust and respect, we suddenly have to realize the most valuable thing our users have is their information, and the most important thing we need to do is protect that information and only gather it when we need to. There's this great talk which actually inspired me to learn about inclusive design called Inclusive Design, Excluding No Gender by Sarah Liren out of Sweden. And she says the simplest way to do inclusive design, stop asking about gender. And she talks about how every time she has a client and they have a form that asks a question about gender, she asks, why do you need that information? All you're doing is providing a barrier to entry to people who may not want to give that info. And the underlying thought through this is that you want to collect just the information you need, not just the information you think you're going to use. You want to have people only provide as little information as you need to get whatever job you need done. So there's plenty of valid use cases to ask for gender. Drupal.org has a gender question, but they provide plenty of options so that you can identify the way that makes sense to you. Because it's important to collect it, let users directly tell you their information the way that they feel or the way that is accurate. So again, it's about collecting only information you need and asking questions to our clients, to ourselves, to our stakeholders. Why do we need this data from these users? What purpose does it serve? Do we just collect it just because we always have and we've never done anything about it? Then stop collecting it. There's a valid reason why we need that information. What options can we give to our users to provide it to us? It's their data. We need to give them the control to tell us as accurately as possible about themselves. Do we need to provide checkboxes of male or female for a gender question, or can we make it an open text field? And finally, most importantly, I would say, we should ask ourselves, why should users give this to us? What reason are we providing users to give us this information? This kind of goes back to providing usable content or understandable content. We need to tell users, hey, this is why we would like this info. Inform them so that they can make a decision if they want to give it to us or not. A good example of this is Pinterest.com, and yes, because of this talk, I have a Pinterest account. They have the gender question when you sign up, male or female, but then there's an info box. And it says, hey, tell us about yourself. We use this to help provide better search results to you. If you don't recognize yourself as male or female, tell us your gender. Let us know so that we can accurately collect information and find out how people identify themselves and how we can provide recommendations to them. So they're very mindful about the information they're collecting. It's not a required question. And they tell us exactly why they want it, and they give us the option to provide that information the way we see fit. Now, believing that every user deserves our trust and respect, we also have to be responsible with the data we collect. There's this idea of protecting PII information, personal information, and being careful of how we collect it. It's very valid. There's a lot of data breaches going on. And if we collect information, we need to make sure our users know they can trust us with it. So we should explain how we're going to use the data, as we showed with Pinterest. We should explain how we're going to protect the data and actually protect it. We should let them know, hey, it's safe with us. We're going to anonymize it, or it's being stored in this way so that it is protected. And again, we have to give users control of their data. You see this happen with cookie policies. Various countries now require that people can opt out of getting cookie information collected. When a user provides information via a form, we should give them the option to go back in and edit that later on. That only helps for them to feel like they still control their data, because they do. We're just using it or getting a peek at it. So if they can keep it up to date, that helps us, that helps them. It goes back to learning more about our users and their limitations and improving our experiences or applications for them. So if we believe in providing every user with trust and respect, what's going to happen? Suddenly we're going to realize that our users have information and it's their information. It's not ours. We don't have any rights to it. But if we want it, we have to be smart about what we're collecting and explain to our users why we're collecting it. And we have to give them the control to maintain their information as accurately as possible, to remove it if they want to. So those are my 4 pillars. No user is average. Every user deserves equal access. To provide understandable content for every user, and every user deserves our trust and respect. How many people here think they could start using at least one of these pillars in their next project going forward? Yeah, just about everybody. Excellent. Thank you for agreeing to that. Just because you did that, I'm going to make these tweetable length. No average, equal access, understandable content, trust and respect. These are 4 simple things that if we start applying to every project, we're going to build a better experience for our users. We're going to go beyond the differences in accessibility, but the differences that make up the whole human population and plan better for our users. And when we do this, when we start using these, what's going to happen is what we all said we do at the beginning, is we're going to provide a positive impact for as many people as possible. So I shortened this a bit to fit in the time length, especially if Coffee's going to be here. I want to make sure you have enough time to get to it. So I have some resources, and these links will be up online. If I set up TweetDeck correctly, they should be tweeting shortly. They're all bit.ly links. DCN17IDX is this presentation, annotated, so you can read through it. The slides are available, DCN17IDX slides on SlideShare. I have Todd Rose's The Myth of Average, his TED Talk, really great. The BBC's Semantic Guidelines. And then Sarah Liren's talk, Inclusive Design, Excluding No Gender. Highly recommend listening to that. It's just very inspiring. In terms of inclusion in the Drupal community, there is the Drupal Diversity Working Group that has recently started. And that's a group of people who are working towards making sure Drupal events in the Drupal community is as inclusive as possible. And they're open to having people help out, and anyone can join in and offer advice or help make events like this camp, which is very inclusive. It's been great. But they're providing and developing material to provide to camps and conferences about, hey, how to include other people and differences to think about. So they meet online on Slack every Thursday, I think it is. But check it out. It's a fun group of people. And I love user feedback with my presentations to make them better, to make sure that I'm building them to be as inclusive to the audience as possible. So I welcome any feedback you have. Reach me on Twitter or talk to me later on. And with that, I'll say thank you. And we have time for questions, so I will put back up the resources if anybody has questions. Or applause. Either one works.
Kind of further to my earlier comment about like number of pieces of content needed to build a page, I started down this path of like looking at like I use a global speed testing tool.
Yep.
And like I travel a lot, and I was noticing go to South America and I couldn't get to my website, and then I moved it to New York instead of Canada. And then when I went to India, I could access it, but it was very slow. And here I get some timeouts, and I found that like using a global latency test is really informative because you start to realize how many round trips you're doing, and like each ocean is like 100 milliseconds roughly. So, or like, you know, the width of North America is about 100 milliseconds, and we're close to the speed of light here. It's not going to get much better than this. It might get down to 50, but it's not going to get much better. And one way you can counteract that drop-off that people experience, like if you're waiting more than 10 seconds, you're gone.
Yeah.
Like most people don't stick around. So thinking about things, if you're trying to reach a global audience, it's something to consider. Like don't just test it locally, but also like fan out and test it from a variety of locations and see how long it actually takes. Because you might start to optimize in different ways.
No, yeah, that's definitely a good point, is to plan on a global scale and test to see how your application might be interacted with, say, from India or South America. It'd be great if you can travel those places and actually physically do the test, but if you can't, again, there are tools that you can use to do that and test that out. All right, if there's no other questions, thank you very much.